So it gives.
Sure. Okay, so that's a good question. So, all right. So, it seems like there was this error where Pankaj isn't able to get import requests to work. So, requests, it seems like, uses there is an outside library. So for instance, I'm not able to reproduce it on my machine, but if you're getting no package requests. So there's basically, you want to use pip. Pip is a way to download other libraries, right? So I would do pip3 install the requests library. Right. The other thing you could do is copy and paste the error, obviously, into Google. So no module requests, something like that. Python.
But if this thing works in Jupyter, why will not this work in VS Code? So that
Okay.
means I have the requests. I mean, if Jupyter should also not work unless.
Well, they can be using two different installations of Python on your computer. So there's two different things. One is if it's in Colab, right? Colab is doing it on one of Google's computers, not ours. So that's one thing, and
Got it.
that already has it installed. Two, even if you're using Jupyter locally, like using Anaconda, Anaconda has a different version of Python and has a second version of Python installed for you, and would need to be installed through Anaconda. And so anyway, that's the reason why it could not be there for you. So if you're doing it just through pip3 install request, if you're doing it through this environment, through the terminal, right? This is by typing pip3, first of all, that means I'm installing this with Python 3, and you can see this is actually installing, in my case, with, it seems like, Miniconda. Like that is the version of Python it's using. I guess I set my environment up to do that. And then it's installing it here. Okay? So you can even, this is just a place on your computer. Like we could CD into this and then open it. And here you can see, the various libraries that are installed. You see I have a bunch, right? Including the requests library is installed here. Okay.
And VS Code make use of Anaconda, right? I mean,
Well,
it looks.
that's complicated too, because if you say you run by doing Python 3, let's go out. So I'm gonna just drop this file, I think. Can I do this? Yeah, okay. So I just dropped the file in my terminal so that I quickly get the path to it, and then but I have to just delete the index.py file. All right, so now I'm here. So if you type Python 3, now it's using that same Python environment in your shell, okay? So Python 3, index.py. It will, if I do something like import requests, it's going to be using the environment that's loaded in the terminal here. However, if you're using this terminal, which I tend not to use, but I think for some computers like Windows machines, sorry about that. It may be easier to use. Some students have preferred to use it. If you do this new terminal thing, this can be using different versions, like a separate version of Python. What you have to do is look at what version. You can see here, it tells me what version of Python it's using, and you can see that here it's using this opbrew Python 3.11 thing, which is different, I think, than what we just saw was being used. So it depends. If I run it from here, it's a different Python than if I run it from here. Okay, you can select it to make it the same. All right, so yeah, like these are different environmental issues that can crop up. Oh, good point. Yeah. So you can see which version of Python you're using in either case by typing like which Python 3, and you can see, okay, this is the version that's being used from the shell. users Jeff, Miniconda, bin 3, bin Python 3. If I do which Python through 3 here, this is different. These are not the same. Users Jeffrey Katz, Miniconda, Python 3 versus homebrew bin Python 3. I can switch them, I think. Let's do that. Jeffrey Katz, Miniconda, Python 3. Miniconda, maybe this is the same now. Now if I do which Python 3. No, doesn't appear to be. Maybe I have
You
to
might
refresh.
have to start a new tab or something.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
that's what I'm thinking.
But why will you do so many Python? I mean,
Because they're installed. It's not like I chose to. Like when we download a VS Code, it's to get this thing working out of the box. It's using its own like Python 3, I believe. Like making sure. And then Anaconda, if you download Anaconda, it comes with its own version of Python. So it's just like these different, and then your Mac, when you buy the Mac, it already has Python installed on it, right? So this is why, you want to pay attention to this. So this now, now maybe it lines up. I don't know. Maybe I have to do a new tab. I just did this. Maybe I have to do conda deactivate. And now which Python? User bin. So you can see once I did this, this is kind of like a bit of a, we haven't talked about conda because we haven't had to. So if you're able to get it working, I don't want to really go down this route right now, but just know that you can see like that all of a sudden VS Code was using using this environment, and now that I've said don't use it's using, I guess, Anaconda underneath, and now that I'm saying don't use that virtual environment, now it's defaulting back to user bin Python. So it's just a matter of, I guess, knowing that the Python you're using in the terminal can be different than the Python you're using in the VS Code terminal, right? And then of course when you go to Colab, well, that's not even on your computer, right? This is on Google's computer. You're just accessing it through a website. And, that's why it takes a second for us to run the code, right? We're running it on Google's computer. And you can see, one thing to point out is, you can see the various Python library, like, we can do this which Python. And then you can also do like pip3 list. And you can see these are all the libraries I have installed, right, by pip3 list. Okay, and these are the packages installed under Python 3. That's different than pip list, right, which is, in other words, if I type Python 3, that's using everything we just saw with, under pip3 list. But if I just type Python, which is using version like Python 2, right? I guess it's not. I guess in this case they hacked it, so it's the same version. I'm always using Python 3. But maybe on a different computer, it would be going to using Python 2. That then would have its own set of libraries installed. So just pay attention to these details, right? I generally only am using Python 3. Like I'm only typing Python 3 in here, and when I'm installing something, I'm doing pip3 install the requests library. All right, and you can see where it's installing it under Miniconda, Python 3.9, site packages, etc.
But Jeff, in typical project scenario, there will be different developers working, so they will be doing their own thing. So how will, once they migrate to the system, how will these things will synchronize? I mean,
you'll have, one, there's a couple things. One is Docker, so we'll have Docker will make the environment consistent. Two is, in terms of the packages, with the packages, you'll create a requirements.txt file, and in that requirements.txt file, it will list oftentimes all the packages you need to install, and then all you do, so if we open this up, is you'll list, they'll list, say, requests and pandas, right? And then what you'll do is you'll do pip3 install -r requirements.txt. So install everything that's listed in this requirements.txt file. All right, and you can see that's what it's doing here. And it's saying, hey, we already have it. I don't need to install it, but that's what you would do. And you can, this one, I don't know if it has requirements.txt. I'm sure it has some sort of equivalent. Well, we can see if it has it. There it is, requirements.txt file. So like in the Airflow, here's all the, here's the libraries. And again, I would clone this down and then run, pip3 requirements.txt. Okay. All right. So let's go through testing. So, all right. So basically, the point I want to get across with testing, one is, right, like in your projects, like in life, you should always be writing tests. Like in the code base I worked in, 3 times the amount of, we had three times as much, for every line of code, there were 3 lines of tests. Let me put it that way. Okay, so why does something like that happen? It's like you want to check like each scenario. If there's a bug, like that means that something wasn't well tested. So we have to write a test to like, that will say when this occurs, make sure it doesn't break. So, and one other thing to note is like when you guys are coding, like when you're coding with say like Colab, like you're naturally kind of writing tests, or we essentially wrote the tests for you because we gave you scenarios. We said, hey, if you get this input, we should expect a certain output from the function. And that's really all a test is. It's just saying, hey, when you get this, we would expect this as a return value, this as the output. All right, that's really it. So it's like when this occurs, or when we pass through this data, we expect certain output. So like an example might be, here I have like a track name, and I would say, if I pass this function, if I pass this track through the clean track function, I expect, what do I expect? I expect this, that we're gonna get this as the output. So then all we do is you can just put an equals here, right? If I pass this string through my function, and this function cleans the track, I would expect that we don't have this hyphen remix anymore. And maybe we'll just print for now what we get back. So now I can run Python 3 index.py and think about what's going to occur here. We're going to give it some sort of data. We're going to execute the function, and then we're going to check that the output equals this specified output. And we see that we got true. That's really a test. Like all tests work the same. What they have is you have the sample data. We can call this like the setup. You execute the function, so we can call this like the cleaned track. This is executing the function, right? And then we have like an assertion, or you check the result, So we're going to check that the clean track equals this string. So basically, to write a test, you give it an example, you give it a scenario, and you say, when we pass in something like this, I would expect this to be the output, right? And that's really it. What you can do then is you can put an assert statement here, and this just like kind of adds like a little bit of, you could see in like Jupyter Lab. Does it do anything? Yeah. Shoot, it doesn't seem like it actually. I guess because it worked. If it failed, let's say we delete this. So now it gives me a list. Now it says, okay, we have an assertion error, right? And it says, hey, it's basically telling me this did not equal that. And maybe what I could say is you can specify as the second argument here what you expect this error message to be. So I can say did not return a string or something like that. Okay, so now you can see the assertion error is that this clean track did not return a string. I don't what would be a better test to make sure it returns a string? Well, it would be clean track that this result right here, probably that the type, equals str. Right? That would be me checking, I guess, that it, right? So when it doesn't equal, when this type is not a string, I'm telling it, hey, this is what I expect, So, cool. So this is, right, so this